This happened last summer. I was trying to get my graphic design work done after my last client canceled unexpectedly. It was just me in this 2-story rental in a quiet neighborhood. Tall trees loomed over homes with faded for sale signs. I thought it would be the perfect time to focus and unwind after my breakup. I never stopped thinking about it. On the third night, I was working late. Then I heard a soft tapping against the window. At first, I thought it was just branches brushing against the glass. It felt off somehow, just enough to stir something in my chest. I stood up and walked over, peeking out. The street was empty. I shrugged it off and went back to my project. The next few days felt strange. That tapping turned into a routine, like a clock ticking. It was always there but never clear. I kept hearing creaking noises as I sat alone. The lights flickered, casting weird shadows on the walls. I told myself it was an old wiring issue. One night, I spotted my neighbor on his porch, his gaze fixed on my house. It sent a chill down my spine. I waved, hoping to break the tension. Yet he just turned away. I felt invisible. Another evening, I was deep into my work when I heard whispers coming from outside my door. It felt strange, like kids but more hushed and secretive. I stood up, my skin prickling. I opened the door, checking to see if anyone was there. Nothing. Just silence. That cold chill hit me again. Was I imagining it? The tapping continued, growing louder. Every noise made me jump. I convinced myself it was just the old house settling, or the wind. I questioned if it was my neighbor. Maybe he was just creepy. Each creak of the stairs echoed in my head, and I felt watched, not just by him but by the house itself. I could hear those whispers again one night. I pressed my ear to the door, heart racing. It felt like someone was speaking right outside. The seconds stretched, and I finally swung the door open. Then I saw him, the neighbor. He just stood there, staring at me. I felt frozen. I asked if he was okay, but he didn't answer. Suddenly, he smiled. There was emptiness in his eyes that chilled me. I backed away, turning to slam the door shut. I took a deep breath, heart pounding. It was just a neighbor, right? But I felt something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that he and the house were connected. I just didn't know how. That night, the tapping turned into urgent knocks. My heart raced as I laid in bed. Was it him? Was he trying to get in? I didn't sleep. I kept staring at my door, waiting for something to happen. Then silence fell like a blanket. I thought, maybe it's finally over. But deep down, I knew it wasn't he. Something was still out there, watching me. I couldn't escape the feeling that my troubles had just begun. The next morning felt heavy with dread. I couldn't shake the memory of the neighbor's unsettling grin. I needed answers, but part of me was terrified at what I might find. I kept replaying his gaze in my mind and how empty it felt. After breakfast, I grabbed my keys. I decided to take a walk and clear my head. The sky was gray, and the air hung heavy. As I passed by the neighbor's porch, I hesitated. I could see him sitting there, motionless, his eyes still trained on my house. Unnerved, I quickened my pace, not wanting to draw his attention. I ended up at the local cafe. It felt calming, even if just for a moment. I ordered coffee and sat by the window. As I scrolled through my phone, trying to distract myself, I overheard a conversation between two locals. They were talking about the neighborhood and its history. I leaned in. "Did you hear about that house?" one said. "The one on Maple Lane?" The other nodded. "Yeah, everyone knows. Strange things happen there. People hear things at night like whispers. Some say the last tenant vanished." My heart raced. Was that why the for sale signs were still up? I tried to catch more of their conversation, but they shifted to another topic. I felt sweat form on my palms. I needed to understand what was happening in my own home. I made my way back, feeling that familiar unease creeping back in. Each step on my porch made my heart pound harder. I hesitated at the door, then took a deep breath and stepped inside. I needed to check if anything had changed. As I moved through the house, everything felt eerily still. The tapping was gone, but the weight of silence hung over me. I reached the living room when a chill swept through the air. I checked the windows, unsure what I was looking for. Outside, a figure shifted in the shadows, the neighbor again. I could feel his gaze piercing through the glass. Suddenly, an intense knock echoed through the room, jolting me. My breath hitched. It came from the back door. Who could it be? The thought of the neighbor outside sent my mind racing. I backed away, looking for anything to block the door if it came to that. Then the whispers returned. They grew louder, overlapping each other. It felt like they were calling my name. Panic surged as I edged toward the kitchen, even as the knocks grew more insistent. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer, just those damn whispers. That's when I saw it. The back door was slowly creaking open. I had locked it. I froze, staring at the widening gap. Fear wrapped around my throat like a vice. The whispers intensified, urging me to step closer. I felt compelled, unable to resist their call. But then a shadow flitted by the doorframe, and instinct kicked in. I rushed back, heart racing, not knowing what awaited me just beyond that doorway. I stumbled backward, nearly colliding with the kitchen counter. My mind raced as I watched the door inch open. Whoever or whatever was out there was about to step inside. The air felt electric, charged with something I couldn't name. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a fog. "Come outside," they seemed to chant. "We're waiting." My instincts screamed at me to get out, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Just when I thought I might faint, the door jerked to a stop. Then I heard it. A soft breath that didn't belong to me, coming from the darkened hallway. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. Every nerve in my body was on high alert, and I felt a primal fear wash over me. I dropped my gaze, unwilling to look directly at the source of the sound, but I could feel its presence looming in the back of my mind. I grabbed a kitchen knife from the drawer, its cold steel grounding me, but I was still terrified. What lurked in my home? I needed to know. I crept toward the doorway, peeking around the corner of the fridge. The hallway was dim, shadows lurked where the light didn't reach. As I started to step forward, a low thud echoed from the living room, a heavy object hitting the floor. My breath caught, and I froze again. I risked a glance back at the door, now ajar and swaying slightly, but still no figure appeared. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I needed to confront whatever was happening. I took a deep breath and moved into the hallway. I was almost to the living room when the lights flickered. I paused, heart in my throat, and scanned the room. Everything looked normal, except for the distinct feeling of being watched. And then I saw it, a piece of paper lying on the floor, illuminated by a beam of light. I bent down to pick it up, hands shaking. It was a note, written in a scrawled, hurried script. "They know," it read. "You must leave before it's too late." A chill shot down my spine. Who wrote this? What did they mean? My thoughts raced through the implications of those words. But then, a noise behind me snapped me from my daze. It sounded like a low growl. I spun around, gripping the knife tighter, ready to defend myself. My heart dropped as I saw the shadow again, but this time, it was clearer. The neighbor stood just outside the living room, smirking that same unsettling grin from before. His eyes glinted in the half-light. "You shouldn't have read that," he said softly, stepping fully into the room. Panic surged again. My instincts screamed at me to run, but the confusion rooted me to the spot. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. But his expression shifted, the grin growing wider, eyes narrowing as he stepped closer. "I'm here to help you, dear. You need to understand what's coming," he said, his voice smooth and chilling. The shadows behind him seemed to twist, and suddenly, the whispers erupted in a cacophony around me. "Leave now," they cried. "It's too late." Then, everything went dark. I gasped, jolting awake on the living room floor. The kitchen knife lay inches from my hand, glinting dully in the flickering light. My heart raced as I took stock of my surroundings. Everything seemed unchanged, yet something felt deeply wrong. The whispers had silenced, but the oppressive atmosphere remained. Pushing myself up, I glanced toward the windows. It was nighttime, but something was off. The moonlight was absent. I moved cautiously, feeling the cold floor beneath my feet, searching for my neighbor. Where had he gone? Had I imagined him? Shaking off the remnants of fear, I stood and picked up the note again. I needed to understand. The words taunted me, their urgency still palpable. They know. I couldn't linger on that thought. I had to act. I made my way toward the front door, hoping to escape this stifling claustrophobia. As I reached for the handle, a loud crash resounded from upstairs. My heart sank, a new wave of terror flooding in. I hesitated, hand hovering just above the knob. Should I investigate or run? My throat felt tight, and every instinct urged me to flee, but curiosity gripped me. What if it was connected to my neighbor or that note? I took a deep breath and crept toward the staircase. Each step felt heavy as I made my way up into the darkness. My mind raced again, concocting scenarios. What if someone was up there? A brand of frantic energy surged through me. At the top of the stairs, I paused, straining to hear anything. The house was still. I picked up a small lamp from a table and turned it on. The beam cut through the shadows, revealing an empty hallway. But then I noticed a door ajar at the end of the hall. It had been closed earlier. Panic twisted in my stomach as I approached it, the lamp shaking in my hand. I could feel my pulse in my ears. What if I wasn't alone? Pushing the door open, I found the bathroom. Nothing seemed out of place, but the window near the bathtub was wide open. A chill crept through, and I stepped closer, peering outside into the yawning darkness. Suddenly, a voice broke through, soft and unsettling. "You're too late." I spun around, searching for the source, but the hallway was still empty. My breath quickened again as I stumbled back, nearly losing my balance. I felt cold dread settle like a weight in my stomach. All those whispers, all those warnings. What did they know? I rushed back to my room, desperate to lock the door behind me, trembling hands finding the knob. When I turned, my breath caught in my throat. The reflection in the glass of the wall showed something behind me, someone standing in the hallway. I whirled around, but nothing was there. Just darkness, waiting and watching. I needed to find out who or what was behind this nightmare. That's when it hit me. I remembered the last time I saw my neighbor. He had stepped outside, just before everything began. My heart raced again. I had to confront him. I couldn't let fear win. I grabbed the knife once more and raced towards the front door, knowing I had to face whatever lay beyond. As I swung the front door open, cold air rushed in, sending a shiver down my spine. The night was suffocating, like it was hiding something. I clutched the knife tightly, stepping onto the porch. My breath clouded in the stillness, but I could hear something faint, a soft scraping sound from the side of the house. I froze, trying to pinpoint the noise. Was it an animal? Or something more? I moved quickly down the steps, heart pounding, and crept along the side of the house. The shadows loomed large, but I couldn't turn back now. I had to figure out what was going on. The scraping grew louder. I edged closer and saw a figure crouched near the bushes, rustling through some leaves. Panic washed over me, but I pressed on. "Hey!" I shouted, brandishing the knife. "Who's there?" The figure jerked up, and my heart dropped. It was my neighbor, drenched in sweat and dirt, eyes wide with fear. "You shouldn't be here," he gasped, glancing around as if expecting something to jump out at us. "What do you mean?" I demanded, taken aback. "What's happening?" His gaze darted to the darkness beyond the trees. "They're coming. They know you're awake." I felt the grip of fear tighten around my throat again. "Who knows? What do they want?" He shook his head rapidly, hands raised. "They're the ones who've been whispering. I tried to warn you. You shouldn't have come back." "Whispering?" I echoed, trying to piece it together, the urgency in his voice sending chills down my spine. "What is this about?" Suddenly, A low growl echoed from the trees, and we both turned. My stomach dropped as I saw shadows flitting among the thick branches. "We need to get inside," I urged, but he grabbed my arm, panic flashing in his eyes. "No! You can't go back there. It's too late for that. We need to hide." Before I could respond, a scream sliced through the air, a horrifying sound that made our skin crawl. It came from the direction of my house, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. Something was wrong, worse than I imagined. I shot a glance toward my front door, now standing wide open, showing nothing but darkness inside. "We can't just stand here," I shouted, and for a moment, I was ready to bolt back inside. But what if the whispers were real? What if it was already too late? Just then, my neighbor's eyes widened in realization. "They're not just after you, they want both of us." I pulled him toward the edge of the porch, heart racing. "What do we do?" That's when I saw a figure emerging from the dark, creeping slowly towards us. Its features were twisted, and it blended almost seamlessly with the night. We gasped in unison, frozen in place. Then everything went dark. I jolted awake, heart pounding in my chest. I was no longer outside, but lying on the cold floor of my living room. The knife had slipped from my hand. I struggled to gather my senses. Had I fainted? I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging through me. The house was eerily silent. I turned towards the door, but couldn't see my neighbor. Panic bubbled in my throat. Had they taken him? "Hello?" I called out, but my voice sounded hollow in the quiet. No answer. I stepped cautiously toward the open door. The cold air poured in, carrying an unnatural stillness that made my skin crawl. I peered outside. The night was still dark, but I could see faint shapes moving in the distance, shadowy figures wandering among the trees. They were watching, and I felt their gaze like a weight pressing down on me. I hesitated, but something tugged at me. The instinct to find out made me step forward. But just as I did, a shudder ran through the house. I blinked, almost convinced I had imagined it. Then a whisper drifted past my ear, soft and chilling. "Help us!" I recoiled at the sound. It was barely audible, but it sent shivers down my spine. I backed away from the door and turned to scan the room. My heart fell as I took in the darkness, the looming shadows stretching across the walls. Suddenly, I spotted something glimmering near the fireplace. I crept toward it, every step heavy with fear. It was my neighbor's flashlight, flickering weakly, as if trying to guide me. I grabbed it and turned it on, the beam cutting through the gloom. As I illuminated the room, a chill enveloped me. Everything seemed in its place, but I felt a wrongness, like an unseen element lurked behind the familiar. Just then, another scream pierced the night, and I flinched. It was distant, but unmistakable. It came from the woods. "Get out!" I shouted into the dark, attempting to rally my courage. I needed to understand what was happening. I moved back toward the door, gripping the flashlight tightly, preparing to step outside again. But just as I reached the threshold, something scuttled across the porch. I swung the light over the area, catching movement in the shadows. A small creature dashed out, disappearing into the dark. Relief washed over me for an instant, but then doubt crept in. Was that just an animal? I wondered aloud, glancing back toward my house. There was only darkness. The growling had stopped. The whispering had faded. I hesitated. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening was only beginning. With a deep breath, I stepped outside again. Before I could process what I was doing, I heard it. The whispering was back, louder this time, echoing all around me. "This way, come with us." The darkness shifted, and I felt the urgency in my bones. Then I heard a familiar voice, clear and piercing through the chaos. "You shouldn't have come back." I turned, breath hitching in my throat, as reality began to unravel. I needed answers, but the night was only giving me more questions. What had awaited me when I returned home? A crack echoed from the woods, followed by a rustle. I wasn't alone anymore. I swung the flashlight wildly, heart racing. The dim light cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees swaying gently in the wind. The familiar whispers faded, replaced by a sinister rustle. My instincts screamed at me to retreat, but my feet felt glued to the porch. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice echoing back to me. The silence deepened, stretching like an unbearable pause before something snapped. I had to know who had spoken. Then I heard it again. "You shouldn't have come back." The voice was louder, tinged with desperation. I scrambled down the steps, flashlight trembling in my grip, illuminating paths where shadows danced among overlapping branches. "Who are you?" I shouted into the dark, hoping for an answer. Suddenly, the rustling intensified. An object emerged from the trees, something human-shaped but shrouded in night. I froze, breath hitching as it drew closer. My instincts screamed to turn and run, but some twisted curiosity held me in place. "Wait!" The figure stepped into the light, a face I recognized but couldn't fully grasp. It was my neighbor, features pale and gaunt, eyes wide with fear. "You should have stayed away. They're coming." "Who's coming?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Where's your family?" He looked past me, then back into the darkness, shifting nervously. "You don't understand. It's not safe here. They'll find us if we don't hurry." My heart sank. "Who's after you?" Should he press a finger to his lips? "Don't say anything. Just run." An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. I turned back toward my house, half expecting something to lunge at me from the shadows. The flashlight beam flickered, and for a split second, darkness enveloped everything around me. Panic set in. "What do we do?" Before he could answer, a distant growl rumbled from the trees, sending chills down my spine. The sound echoed, rising in intensity, and shadows seemed to ripple at the edges of my vision. "They're here!" he gasped, grabbing my arm. His grip was icy, eyes darting back and forth. "We need to move." Just as I started to step back toward the woods, I realized the flashlight was fading, and my only source of light was about to die. "No, no, no!" In that moment of panic, I felt a tug in my gut, a warning to get away. I swung the flashlight around, desperately trying to keep the darkness at bay. That's when I saw it. Behind my neighbor, a shape began to emerge, a tall figure, twisting and shifting in the shadows, its outline almost humanoid but grotesquely elongated. I swallowed hard, heart pounding in my chest. "What is that?" "Run!" he screamed, and we bolted together, feet pounding against the cold ground. The growls grew louder, closing in, and the cold-fingered night began to crush in around us. I ran with no clear destination, driven by sheer instinct. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something, a glimmer of silver under the trees. It stopped me in my tracks. In the distance, a figure staggered, and I recognized it. The knife I'd dropped lay where I'd left it, just beyond the shadows, glimmering with eerie assurance. I needed it. I needed to confront whatever was pursuing us, but as I turned, the heavy shadows quaked, and the tall figure pressed closer. The air was electric with tension. "Help us," it whispered again, wrapping around me like a chain. And then everything went dark. I gasped as consciousness crashed back like a wave. My mind raced, confused. Had I passed out? The cold ground pressed against my back. I blinked rapidly, eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the branches above. Where was the creature? Where was my neighbor? The flashlight lay beside me, its faint beam flickering weakly, fighting to stay alive. I scrambled to grab it, fingers trembling. The rustling of leaves replaced the growls, but an unsettling silence filled the space around me. I was alone. "Mike?" I called out, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. No answer. Panic ignited again as I pushed myself up. "Mike!" Silence answered, heavy and empty. I stood cautiously, heart thumping loudly in my chest. My breath quickened as I looked around. Shadows twisted in every direction, and the trees loomed like sentinels, hiding secrets I wasn't prepared to uncover. I forced myself to step forward, each crunch of twigs underfoot amplifying the tension. I needed a plan. Find Mike. Get to my house. Light. I took a deep breath and focused. My body was on edge, but the knife waited in the dark, drawing me closer, still glimmering and sharp. I turned to where I thought it was, feeling the weight of the air shift as if urging me to step back. I waded through the brush and reached the spot. The knife lay just as I'd left it. Relief washed over me momentarily, but it quickly morphed into unease as I noticed what had disturbed the ground nearby: large, dark footprints in the fallen leaves, too big and too twisted for human feet. Something had been here. My pulse quickened at the thought. I picked up the knife, gripping it tightly. It felt good to hold something solid. Then I heard it again. A soft whisper, like a breeze passing through. Help us, my heart raced. It wasn't just a memory. It was an echo calling from deeper in the woods. Enough games! I shouted into the darkness, trying to regain control. The whisper ceased, replaced by a new sound: rapid breathing. My blood ran cold. There was someone or something else out here. Suddenly, a figure stumbled into the partial light of my flashlight, revealing a familiar shape. It was Mike, but he looked different. His clothes were torn, his skin looked ashen, eyes wide and unfocused. "Run!" he gasped, but his voice was weaker than before. "They're coming back for us." Before I could react, the chilling growl returned, louder and more menacing, shaking the very ground beneath us. The shadows gathered, morphing and twisting, expanding toward us like dark fire. I felt the air thicken, a palpable dread wrapping around us. "Where?" I shouted through the noise. "Where do we go?" "Into the house," he yelled, voice strained. "It's our only chance." With no time to hesitate, I grabbed his hand and pulled him along. We darted away, adrenaline mingling with fear. As the looming shadows threatened to swallow us again, I ran with all my might. But I could feel it, that sinister presence closing in, stronger than before, and it wanted us. We burst from the trees, racing toward the porch light of my home, the only beacon of safety. Just as we reached the steps, I heard the howl echo through the trees, a shriek of frustration. "Get inside!" Mike shouted, and I pushed the door open, heart racing. I slammed the door behind us, catching my breath, but a new sense of panic gripped me. The windows trembled, and I realized something was outside waiting. "Did they follow us?" I asked, eyes wide with terror. "I don't know," Mike panted, collapsing against the wall. "But we can't let them in." And just like that, I was left grappling with the knowledge that whatever was out there was still coming for us. My heart thudded in my chest as I backed away from the door, fighting the urge to bolt again. I scanned the dim hallway, searching for anything that could help us fend off whatever hunted us. The flickering lights made shadows dance along the walls, but I couldn't wait for them to swallow us whole. "Grab something," I whispered sharply to Mike, who still leaned heavily against the wall. "Anything we can use." He nodded, his gaze darting towards the kitchen. I took a deep breath and stepped into the room, the faint smell of dust mingling with the electrical tang of the past minute's terror. As I rummaged through the drawers, I found a canister of kitchen knives. I grabbed a paring knife and slipped it into my pocket, opting for something larger, a heavy chef's knife that felt reassuring in my grip. Suddenly, I heard a loud thud against the front door. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the house. I turned to Mike, whose eyes widened, reflecting the same fear I felt. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I don't know," he whispered back, barely keeping his voice steady. The noise shifted, sounding like claws scraping against wood, testing our defenses. Whoever or whatever was out there hadn't given up. A low growl resonated beyond the door, sending chills down my spine. The creature was close. "Please tell me how you got away," I urged. "What did you see?" Mike swallowed hard, the ashen color of his face contrasting with the kitchen's pale light. "I don't know everything. I just saw them. They were watching. Waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you and me." His eyes dropped to the knife in my hand. "We shouldn't have gone out there. It was a trap." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, anger mixing with fear. A trap? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I thought I could handle it. He gasped, his breath shaky. But it's worse than we thought. They'll come for us until we're gone. A loud crash came from the other side of the door, rattling the frame. This time, we both jumped, and I felt my heart race again. I stepped back beside him, the heavy knife feeling like my only chance at survival. Do we go upstairs? Hide? I said, my voice urgent. No, he replied, shaking his head. We need to find a way out. They won't stop until they find us. He spotted the window behind the kitchen sink. My heart dropped. Are you crazy? It's our best shot. He rushed towards it, prying the window open with trembling hands. Come on. I hesitated, a part of me still hoping we could barricade ourselves in. But as another crash rattled the door, I knew staying was not an option. I joined him, our breaths mingling in the rising panic, and climbed out as fast as I could. We dropped to the ground outside, landing softly in the overgrown grass. I looked back at the door, now above us, feeling vulnerable in the open air. What if it came through? Just then, I noticed something shimmering in the moonlight a few feet away. I squinted, realization creeping in as I recognized it. The knife I dropped earlier. The one I had left behind. That S when I saw it, I whispered, pointing. What is it doing over there? Before Mike could respond, a sound echoed from inside, the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open, followed by the padding of heavy footsteps. I turned to Mike, my heart in my throat. We have to move now, I urged, urgency flooding my words. But it was already too late. I bolted toward the knife, my breath nearly stilled by terror, eyes locked on the shadowy figures that crept from the doorway. There was no time to lose. I lunged for the blade, fingers brushing the cool metal as a cold gust whirled around us. They're coming! Mike yelled, gripping my arm as I lifted the knife, heart racing. I felt it in my bones, the oppressive darkness was hungry. Behind us, the rasping footsteps were drawing closer. We had to run. My feet pounded against the ground as I fought against the instinct to look back. Mike tugged at my sleeve, a mixture of fear and panic urging me on. I darted toward the tree line, knowing we needed to find cover, but for where? The whispers echoed again, swirling around us, taunting us. Into the woods! I shouted, hearing the growl of whatever followed us. We needed to break their line of sight. We plunged forward, inky shadows enveloping us as we ran deeper. Branches scratched at my arms, and the underbrush crunched beneath our hurried steps. Faster and faster we pressed on, until the house faded from view, swallowed by darkness. A rustle startled us both, and I spun around, knife raised defensively, ready to strike. But there was only the echo of the wind. What now? Mike gasped, skin pale and eyes wide with fear. Which way do we go? My brain raced frantically, pulling at my thoughts, trying to remember if we had seen any paths. We need to find a clearing, I urged him, forcing my voice to stay steady. We can't let them catch us off guard. We ducked and weaved through the trees, breaths mingling with the sharp night air. Just as I thought we had a moment's reprieve, those piercing growls erupted in the bushes around us. My heart plummeted. They were hunting, closing in. Over there. Mike pointed toward an unusual gap between the trees. I squinted but saw only reaches of darkness. Desperation clawed at me, urging me onward. We sprinted toward the opening, and I hoped there might be some shred of safety within. The gap widened, and to my relief, we tumbled into a clearing lit only by the flickering moonlight. It was too much, but at least we weren't surrounded. I breathed heavily as we stumbled away from the brush, chests rising and falling. What now? Mike asked again, eyes darting around the clearing as if expecting the shadows to leap out and grab him. We find something to defend ourselves with, I said, still frantically scanning for anything. In our haste, I'd nearly forgotten the weight of the knife in my hand until I felt its cool metal grounding me. Mike sank to the ground, panting. They'll find us, they always do. His voice trembled, but I couldn't let him see my worry. There has to be something. We just need suddenly, The whispers grew into a chorus, washing over us, reverberating through the trees. Help us, they know. The sound made my skin crawl, as though the forest itself was alive, weaving its despair around us. I whirled to look into the edges of the clearing, but the shapes remained hidden, lurking beyond our sight. Run! I snapped against the rising panic, but Mike was staring at something across the clearing, eyes wide as if possessed. What? I demanded, following his gaze. There, lying half buried in leaves, was an old, rusting fire pit. Discarded logs were scattered about, and wooden planks leaned precariously nearby. My heart raced at the thought. Fire, I whispered, the idea igniting in my mind. Yes. A fire! Mike exclaimed, suddenly invigorated. We need to get it going. Reality washed over me. If we could just drive them back, perhaps we could keep ourselves hidden. Together, we hurried to the pit, tossing the leaves aside, grappling for the dry wood. As we worked, the temperature in the air shifted. The whispers grew louder, like a storm gathering forces. The growls crept closer, our moments slipping away. Faster! I urged, breathless. We gathered what we could, shoving old logs into the center of the pit. I fumbled for the matches I swiped from the kitchen earlier, and I forced myself to ignore the approaching shadows. With a flick, the small flame erupted, licking at the kindling. Cackling flames sprang to life, illuminating the night. For a heartbeat, everything seemed okay, but shadows flickered at the edges of the fire. They didn't like this warmth. Mike widened his eyes as dark figures crept out from the trees, swirling in disarray. Don't let them come close, he shouted, clenching the knife in a trembling hand. Stay behind me, I barked. The growling intensified, voices contorting into furious whispers, and just like that, they lunged at us, shadows crashing into the light, threatening to snuff it out. The contrast of flame against despairing darkness felt like a battle I would never win. The figures halted at the perimeter, their dark forms quaking but unwilling to breach the fire. I felt relief momentarily as they writhed, screeching, but I knew this wasn't over. Keep it burning! Mike yelled, throwing a heap of branches onto the blaze. The fire leapt higher, and I waved the knife in front of me, desperate to fend off any that dared approach. We need to leave, he shouted, but the shadows whispered, drawing us back. What if we can't? I breathed heavily. What if they don't let us? With no time to dwell on those horrifying thoughts, I caught movement beyond the light, a familiar silhouette slipping through the night. No! I shouted again, dread pooling in my stomach. It was my neighbor, appearing from the dark. But that smirk had returned, the twisted grin blazed in contrast with the dim light, and my heart sank. You shouldn't have come, he intoned, stepping into the glow, and the shadows around him writhed as if pulling at his body. The enticing whispers returned, snapping like electric currents down my spine. It's too late for escape. Mike! I yelled, but the flames filled my focus. Stand back! The looming figures glared at the fire, unable to approach, but fear gnawed at my heart. They weren't leaving, they were waiting. I couldn't let my guard down, couldn't consider my options. Our light flickered, grew dim under the weight of that spectral voice. Whatever was closing in was stronger than ever. And then the world crashed down again. I woke up gasping, sprawled out on the living room floor. Everything was as it had been. The house felt eerily peaceful, but that whisper lingered. I blinked furiously, everything a blur. The knife lay close by. I pushed myself off the floor, shaking. Had I dreamt it? My heart thudded in confusion as I took stock. Silence hung around me, but an unsettling feeling churned in my stomach. Mike! I called out, but met only shadows. Maybe it had all been a nightmare? But the weight of the past night dug deep, echoing through my mind, the figure, the whispers. A sense of dread washed over me as more mixed signals clouded my thoughts. I blinked at the door, half expecting it to swing open to the dark outside, but waited in weighing silence. I climbed back to my feet, navigating toward the door with unease pulling at me. As I grasped the handle, a gut instinct told me to hesitate. The night outside felt dark and alive, bubbling with uncertainty. I needed to find answers about my neighbor, the whispers, the continuous sinister pull. I pushed the door open a crack, frost curling in the night air. But the instant chill wrapped around me, and I felt those familiar voices beckoning, drawing me closer. Come back, come home. I stepped back instinctively, my heart echoing in tune with the nagging sensation that flickered at the edges of my consciousness. What home was this? Everything felt off, electric. I locked the door firmly, gasping as a singular thought washed over me. I didn't just want to survive this night. I needed to learn more about what lay beyond my door. But at what cost? I took a deep breath, straining against uncertainty that swallowed me whole, and then I stood there rooted, peering into the dark, forever testing what waited outside. Sometimes, I wonder if we ever truly escape,